right. Hey everyone, and welcome a brand new childhood TV memories video. And this is the first one of 2026. In this childhood TV memory, I'm gonna finally talk about my sort of memories of basically programs I've seen on the BBC during my because I mean, obviously the funny thing is, despite the fact that I did watch a lot of quite a bit of ITV during my during growing up and stuff, the BBC was also another priority channel. My like family and in terms of the household and stuff, BBC and ITV basically close together when it came to like most watched channels, alongside Fox Kids and a little bit of Cartoon Network here and there, but mostly the BBC and ITV. But I thought I will focus on the BBC end of things because we're going to begin things off by, I mean, I'm obviously going to, I'm not going to do it in Pacific order or anything. I'm just going to like talk about each show as I think of it pretty much. And that's how I'm going to structure this thing. So we're going to start with a drama because I felt like I need to this drama up first because I remember it quite fondly. And funny enough, you can actually watch the episodes on BBC iPlayer. So I'll leave a link to BBC iPlayer if you want to see these programs that may be on BBC iPlayer. I believe some of them. The first drama we're going to bring up is obviously a drama that was kind of basically based on like I like to believe it's a real life story, even though some will probably disagree on that sort of notion whether it's real or not. But I'm still gonna believe it's like a real thing. Robin Hood, back in the noughties, back in the early days of the Circle era of the BBC, when the BBC were introducing that whole circle identification, they introduced us into the world of Robin Hood. Their sort of recreation of Robin Hood during this time was just brilliant. It was a Saturday night show, by the way. This was going out on Saturday nights, and it was kind of their Saturday night drama. Basically when Doctor Who wasn't on, this was on essentially, and it just blew me away pretty much. The intense, I guess the drama and the intensity aspects of like the storylines they were bringing up in this, because obviously they were staying true to the stories of Robin Hood. The fact that they did a pretty good job to do like 3 series of this program as a drama on the BBC, and it was just really fascinating to see. Especially, they had some actors. Funny enough, they had a couple of actors from Casualty appear in this series as well, which was quite extraordinary to see some of those characters in the world of Robin Hood, and especially to see the 2 young men who were against each other at first, following the death of Robin's sister, essentially, or kind of one of them was kind of had this sort of affection towards Robin's sister, and then as soon as they started to work together against the sheriff. They were against the sheriff's plans, and it was really fascinating to see his assistant turn against him to work with Robin Hood in the first series, and then eventually go work side by side together. And that was quite a fascinating moment because it's quite extraordinary to see these 2 work together even though they hate each other. Yeah, it was very extraordinary sort of unfold as we get to like the concluding moments of the Robin Hood series. But yeah, like I said, it was on for 3 series. They did a very, really good job with it, and it was just amazingly done. Did a really good job, especially as a Saturday night drama. Took us, especially some of us Doctor Who fans, hooked whilst we were waiting for new content. And of course, we'll talk about Doctor Who later in the program. So that's what I love about Robin Hood, and you can watch it for yourselves on BBC iPlayer if you want to see the action of what makes that drama a success as a Saturday night drama. And I fancy there's a part of me that actually wouldn't mind rewatching it again after all these years. And I believe it would have been an anniversary this year for that drama. I'm pretty sure it would be. So it kind of would make sense to revisit it again, especially considering the anniversary aspect of the show. I think I wouldn't mind revisiting this show again. I think it'd be really great. I wouldn't mind that. I think that would be really cool. We move forward to our next program, which is a comedy, in fact. And in fact, this comedy, I'm gonna be totally honest, this comedy been met with controversy in recent times because of the content surrounding this comedy, and also one of the comedians in this show has also kind of doing some inappropriate stuff that got themselves into basically put themselves in a scenario where they would end up losing their publishing rights to write books and and more importantly, kind of exiled themselves out of television to the point where nobody wants to work with this comedian pretty much ever again. The show I'm referring to is, of course, Little Britain, obviously a show that was made by Matt Lucas, and that guy, yes, the guy who kind of did something inappropriate during the Would I Lie to You Christmas recording. Yes, that man, David Williams. Pretty much, obviously he was, this was way before he did his children's book stuff. He was doing stuff with Matt Lucas. This was obviously a breakthrough comedy, obviously. It went kind of extreme. Probably know how extreme I'm talking about. The fact that they talked about like basically anything beyond what would be acceptable, they were allowed to get away with it. But obviously in these times, they wouldn't be able to get away with a lot of stuff they did, especially with the I guess the whole I guess the more extreme they wouldn't get away with mainly because of the fact that the government are a lot of stuff that they did back then. So therefore, they basically put a rule in place where it prevents them from doing that stuff going forward. And it's just, I mean, I don't really need to go into full depths into some of that content because if you've seen Little Britain, you'll know what I'm talking about. Even though it was funny at the time, looking back at it, you can see why some would have found that stuff offensive, and they probably did. There was probably people complaining to the BBC against that show because of the nature of the content they were seeing each week. And it was just, even though yes, you couldn't help laughing about it, at the same time you kind of feel sorry for the people who were offended by it. And honestly, I mean, like I said, Matt Lucas was, I still find Matt Lucas, don't get me wrong, he's a great comedian, but I do admit that David Williams does take things a bit too with some of his stuff. Recent evidence of basically how he got himself in trouble in the Would I Lie to You special luckily didn't get aired, but if it did, he would have got in serious trouble. It did, but luckily they removed that scene immediately. Luckily, the BBC did the right thing there. But honestly, the fact that he goes so far in terms of how inappropriate he really get, how inappropriate David Williams usually how he get, especially when he's not on the camera. Yeah, you do have to question some of the tactics he does these days, and it's just a shame because he was doing so well with the whole, especially children's contributions. He was doing well with, and it's just a shame he kind of let himself down even after Little Britain when he did that whole Come Fly With Me, which I thought was a really great show. It's just a shame that it never picked up because, maybe the BBC kind of knew back then that there was going to be trouble with David Williams, and that probably would have been I wouldn't be surprised if that was going to lead to his downfall. I mean, who would ever know? Come Fly With Me would have been potentially the start of his downfall. I don't think any of us could have predicted that, but maybe some of us did. But yeah, Little Britain was too extreme in certain areas, and it might have been funny to many of us. It's just a shame that David Williams kind of spoiled his own career by the way he's done stuff lately. And it's just, it's all down to him. He had a chance to be to set an example to a lot of people, and he kind of fell short on that. And that's basically what I believe pretty much ruined his career. As much as we all want to, I'm pretty sure there's people who are going to want him to learn and recover and come back. I don't think that's ever going to happen at this rate. I think basically done and dusted, basically what he did at the Would I Lie to You stuff. I think that's kind of, and especially all the allegations that came out, I think his career's done at this point. And yeah, sure, I mean, Little Britain might be remembered for being a great comedy. It's also going to be remembered for being the most disturbing for a lot of. It's just a shame that he kind of just he just wasn't appropriate to the right people. But hey, at least many of us, including myself, will remember the show Little Britain, and it's just a shame that it's going to be remembered for the for basically the horrible reasons rather than the good reasons, basically, because that's pretty much what it is. Another show I saw on the BBC during the early noughties, they had the whole Little Britain game, eventually led to the whole spin-off Come Fly With Me, and then after that basically there wasn't really much from David. He did like his own sort of Williams and Friends, but it didn't really take off as much as. Nevertheless, we go forward to I feel like we should also acknowledge some entertainment shows now. It's interesting because the first entertainment show we're going to acknowledge in terms of, I have to acknowledge this show because I believe this is I think they only had like one series for this because I didn't recall seeing this program return. This entertainment show was a kind of a really weird game show, and I thought it was very strange that they showed this on Saturday night, but they showed it anyway, and I thought it was very silly named, and I was like, what the heck were they thinking when they made this? I don't know. They had this whole game show of Don't Scare the Hair, and I was sitting there when I first heard about this show, and I was thinking, because surely this is a meme, right? Like, don't scare the hair. This is the sort of thing that people would meme about all over the internet, because this basically what it is. It's basically don't scare the hair. It's kind of this whole don't hassle the Hoff moment. That's kind of what it felt like to me. It's like, but yeah, so they did this whole game show called Don't Scare the Hair, where it was basically a quiz show that, as much as I'm going to try my best to remember like parts of it, and I'm going to get some stuff wrong, but essentially the whole gist of this game show, contestants must compete in a series of challenges to win £15,000 of prize money, and if they fail to complete the questions or physical challenges, risking scaring a giant robotic hare, basically a robotic rabbit, essentially. But yeah, it was basically being described as like a fantasy-based toddler TV with an adult. The problem with that description is that there's no toddlers or kids involved. Quite understand that description, because how on earth would that make any sense? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't really make any sense to me why they would do that, because that doesn't really make any sense why they would do that. It's like, nah, surely they wouldn't make any sense of it. But yeah, it was a very bizarre game show. The fact that they were trying to ask questions not to scare a robotic rabbit, essentially. You're probably wondering, how did the viewers take this show? The idea of like don't scare the hair was so badly executed. They had poor ratings as soon as there was 9 episodes of this show. It was so badly viewed because barely anybody was watching it. It was taken off the air essentially for after the 6 episodes because of the poor ratings, because essentially nobody, after people saw the first episode, they switched off immediately because they were like, what the F is this? I'm going to switch over the channel real quick and then we'll come back when Doctor Who is on. That is probably what they were thinking at the time. And I don't blame them, because it's probably the most bizarre game show they've ever came up with at the time, and I was sitting there like, who came up with this idea? But it was taken off the air after the 6 episodes because of bad ratings. They eventually brought it back for the final 3 episodes in October. Didn't really change the results. It made it it just fell apart. So now we might as well go back to the and I thought we might as well go straight into it, because, well, there is one show that really hooked me when it comes to drama, and of course DVD collection to prove my obsession for it, Doctor Who, the time traveling Time Lord. I didn't get introduced to it till 2005 when the show finally came back. If you know the Doctor Who's history, you'll know that taken off the air, I would say it got paused from the BBC One back in 1989 after the Survival episode with Sylvester McCoy. They brought it back briefly for the TV movie with Paul McGann, and then maybe they also brought it back for like 30 years in the TARDIS, which is 30th anniversary celebration to celebrate 30 years of the show. Apart from those little bits and bobs they did in the 90s, it kind of was properly paused until like they had the right people to bring the show back. And luckily there was people that were enthusiastic bring the show back in 2005, those being Julie Gardner and Russell T Davies. Both of those two had this mindset of bringing the show back in 2005, and they did exactly that. They brought it back with Christopher Eccleston, who became a more, probably the most serious of doctors we've had in the show's history. I do say that he really was a very serious actor into the role. And I was really, from that first episode of Rose and the fact that Billy Piper to when Christopher Eccleston would basically regenerate series 1, that brought the arrival of David Tennant, who was an unknown to me. And as soon as he comes on the screen, as soon as he finally got started and got going, I just fell in love with David Tennant and love his content ever since. I haven't stopped basically watching any of, probably haven't stopped watching David Tennant stuff even to this day, because he's just been that successful since coming into the role of Doctor Who, becoming the 10th Doctor, being a very probably even more popular than Tom Baker, which is surprising. But he really was the Tom Baker of New Who. He literally, the internet, he blew up the whole Doctor Who landscape, and he was, he was basically probably the most talked about Doctor on the internet. Basically, he really was. The amount of, and even the fangirls were loving the show so much because of him. And it was just, he just blew up the brand. He really did. And then as soon as he announced his departure, I think it was obviously a very sad moment. The fact that David Tennant was saying he was going to move on the following year, and it was going to be a very emotional knowing that he was going. And of course, I got a bit emotional with his exit in New Year's Day 2010. But luckily, Matt Smith came along, and he definitely, basically embraced that role in his own unique way. And I loved in his reign of the show, and I was very pleased with how he handled the show and how he basically handled the character, and with the scripts that he was given by Stephen Moffat, even though some were bonkers compared to either way. And then of course we had Peter Capaldi, even when David Tennant came back at the 60th anniversary. It was great to see him again as the 14th. It was crazy enough to even think about the possibility of David Tennant being another incarnation of the Doctor. That was probably the most craziest concept I've ever heard. I think a lot of us thought it was a hoax at one point, but then the fact that it became a reality in 2023 was just unbelievable. It really was. The fact that David Tennant would finally become the 14th Doctor, becoming 2 incarnations in the show's history. Probably the first actor to do such thing in the world of Doctor Who was just unbelievable. And I'm honestly glad that they took that risk and actually did it, because it really establishes that, these actors can possibly return at some point, even though they've got to have to be they have to have storyline in order for it to work. There is potential for that sort of thing to happen in, they could potentially do that at some point if they wanted to. But obviously, as we all know, with the show's future currently, I mean, we still don't know how. The show's in a very lumbo and in a very awkward spot right now, because of course they're trying to save the show. But the fact that there is go on about the future of the show, a Christmas special that we have at the end of the year, we don't really have like a roadmap or a plan of what the future holds for the show. And that's why I kind of want to be whatever is going to hopefully survive and be able to keep doing what it loves to do. But there is a part of me that does wonder if the show going forward. But I mean, luckily we do have the Whoniverse on BBC iPlayer, where you can watch classic episodes of Doctor Who, and basically Doctor Who's history is BBC iPlayer. So there's that. But obviously, in regards to like new episodes and whether the show is going to have new episodes to look forward to in the future, it's very hard to say, because, like I said, when you don't have a road, if there's going to be new episodes to look forward to this year's Christmas special, you kind of have about whether the show is going to survive or not. And I mean, I don't, like I said, I want to be hopeful that Doctor Who's going to survive, but then at the same time, I'm also kind of, in case the worst happens, kind of prepared for, like, should the show not be on the air after 2026, like, sort of prepare for the possibility that the show may, and that we're going to have to start embracing other shows to keep, to basically keep our Saturday night fix alive, basically. And luckily, I've basically been able to find some other shows that are on Saturdays. Luckily, that's been helpful, that there's been other shows that have started to be born. Really unfortunate that we might, the fact that we could be losing a Saturday night in the form of Doctor Who in the future is very disheartening to think about the possibility of that happening. Christmas this year, the fact that we could lose this Saturday night show, possibly for good, especially because of the fact that it's getting more and more expensive, especially for the BBC to keep new episodes of programs these days. It's, with things being so tight, you do have to wonder, does the show even have a future? They claim they have something planned. Until we know otherwise, we can't really say there is a future. We can't really be certain with anything that BBC says until we've seen the plans ourselves, until we see what that future looks like. We can't really judge them on their words. We have to see actions rather than words to know that the show obviously go into another comedy that I've really enjoyed, and he finished it in 2020, and that show being Gavin and Stacey. I think anytime anybody says Gavin and Stacey, there's always a smile on someone's face when they think of Gavin and Stacey, because this show is just brilliant, isn't it? Ruth Jones and James Corden basically created a classic in itself, and has become an award winner in a way, because of the pure comedy that they've written for these characters, from the likes of Bryn, Stacey, Gavin, and essentially, well, for those who, especially if you're somebody who heard about Gavin and Stacey, I might as well do like a brief description here. So essentially, you have Matthew Horn, who plays Gavin, and then Joanna Page, obviously, who plays Stacey. They're essentially obviously preparing for their first date, basically. They've been chatting on the phone at work for a while. They're preparing their first meetup, which was going to be in London. Essentially, obviously Gavin was going to bring his mate Smithy. Stacey was bringing her longtime friend Nessa, played by Ruth Jones, of course. Obviously, James Corden plays Smith. Both are, by the way, the creators, and they essentially decided to meet up with Stacey in London, because they wanted to go in London to finally meet up and finally know each other a lot better. So they decided to meet up and stuff, and then eventually they would end up going to because obviously that's what young people did. Of course, this obviously led to the fact that they were very into each other, and they were just connected very instantly, and they just had this sort of towards each other, to the point that they just wanted to be around each other all the time. And as you see through the programs, throughout the episodes, and then throughout the show, you can see their sort of love and their relationship also influences members of their family. Obviously Gavin's parents, Pam, obviously Smithy, and then obviously Nessa gets sort of influenced, and then obviously you have Stacey's sort of family also, see, with Gavin's family, and becoming this sort of one united family from Barry Island in Wales, which was where Gavin was a part. He was a part of that part of London, essentially, and it kind of built their relationship over time, to the point that they would eventually get married. Gavin and Stacey, that is, would eventually get married, and then of course from there they would also. But then at the same time, you would also see difficult times as well, when they were struggling to raise their family and stuff, and they was trying to deal with that, and they were having sort of backwards and forwards argument how to deal with stuff. And then obviously over time we would see Nessa and Smithy sort of get close, even though Smithy wasn't really interested. And then obviously Nessa kind of grew liking Smithy down the road, till eventually they would have their sort of marriage towards the end, and it was a very fitting moment to see these two characters would finally tie the knot at the very end with somebody else. But then eventually these two finally tied the knot, and being the final moment was quite a special moment. It's just, honestly, I just love the atmosphere that Gavin and Stacey brings. Isn't into these specials, which was the 2019 special, and then the finale. It was just really great, and obviously it's going to be very, very missed. It's going to be sorely missed, a lot of us, but at least we're going to still be rewatching them years to come, and I'm still going to rewatch Gavin and Stacey, because of course we're going to be rewatching Gavin and Stacey, because Gavin and Stacey is just the best. Like, who wouldn't want to rewatch on BBC iPlayer? Of course not. I mean, we're all going to be watching it. We will. I do recommend you check out, if you haven't watched any episodes at all, then they're on BBC iPlayer. They're all there. Definitely check it out. It's a really, really great comedy, and you can watch it from start to finish now, because the comedy's finished for good, but at least you can still. And then of course the next entertainment show, obviously have to acknowledge, and I thought it would be more of those memories with you. So be sure to subscribe, and also continue to support the channel, obviously, because I would like to definitely do a lot. I'm gonna cool TV content on the way, and I've even thought about potentially doing potentially uploading 60s trailers for the BBC at some point. To hear what everyone thinks about that. Maybe me doing some BBC 60s content or something along those lines. Would you guys be interested in that stuff? Let me know in the comment section. But I will catch you guys in part 2 soon. So see you then.